When I start writing a new book or a new series, usually the first germ of an idea can come to me a bunch of different ways. Maybe it's a specific character, maybe it's a funny scene, maybe it's a setup. And so in this case, in the Wild Winchesters, it was more of a setup. I've always loved superhero type plots. They don't have special powers or anything like that. If you watch the TV show Leverage, it's very much like Leverage in Regency England. So, you've got your heist. I love a good heist. And I wanted to bring that kind of action adventure element to every book in a setting where you don't normally see it. People rolling down the street in their carriage, getting away. And so I liked to mix those. I like to mix genres. So this specific series, I wanted a diverse cast, kind of fighting for the underdog in this morally gray kind of way. The Governess Gambit and the Duke Heist. Governess Gambit is a prequel to the Duke Heist, and so I definitely loved Chloe. She kicked off the series. She heisted the actual Duke, and so that was a lot of fun. You don't usually get to see that. And then The Perks of Loving a Wallflower. I adore Tommy, one of my all-time favorite main characters to write. Just a very different character, so confident in so many ways and capable in so many ways, but also nervous like we all are, afraid of doing or saying the wrong thing in front of the love interest. It was a lot of fun. In my Road to Ruin, one of the things that I wanted to do differently was have a forced proximity situation. They're stuck somewhere against their will and they have to figure out a way to solve the problem and get out. And in Hot Earl Summer, I wanted to have a sword fight, just battles, what you normally don't really see in Regency England, and like how would that play out and how could it be funny and a really good time. And A Waltz on the Wild Side, which is the sixth book, Jacob's story. Lots of animals, a very capable heroine, and as a change, someone who doesn't want to be a Winchester. That in the other books, usually it was kind of aspirational to belong to a family like this, and I wanted to explore what it would look like to someone who was like, no thanks, and how would you change your mind? So I put a lot of thought into the main characters before I start writing, before I even start plotting the book. I really need to know who they are, what they're coming from, how they mesh together, and how they conflict, because you really got to sell that these two are meant for each other, right? They're soulmates. The reader has to want them to get together and believe it at the end that this was the best choice for them. But also they have to have believable reasons, not to just say, yeah, you're right, you're the one for me at the end of chapter one, or there's no story. So you've got to have both elements there. And I love coming up with different conflicts and different backgrounds, just try and explore different ways that the characters might have things in common that they don't see initially, or maybe superficially the things they have in common are actually the source of their conflict later on, or different things like that. So I usually spend probably a solid day thinking about my main characters, and then the second day I do a lot of thinking about the plot, before I ever try to write the first line. In Bianca and the Huntsman, the main character is biracial, black and white, just like me. And so that's not your traditional Regency heroine. And then in Her Princess at Midnight, also like me, you have a queer protagonist, which has been underrepresented historically in the genre. So in those two cases, it's perhaps more from a diversity perspective, but also in other books that I've written, I just like to look for ordinary people, regular people, people like you and me, people like your next door neighbor. I get asked a lot, like, why don't I always write about lords and ladies in ballrooms? I do sometimes, but not always, because I think there's so many stories out there, and I don't always want to tell the same ones. And sometimes some of the most interesting ones are depict the people who don't usually get to be the protagonist. So one thing is how fast I write them, and another thing is how fast they're released, which isn't necessarily the same time frame. So when I can, I like to bank a couple books up first so that they can be released more rapidly, to give readers more of a flavor of the series, so they can, get hooked, decide if it's for them, that kind of thing. For this series specifically, I just really wanted to have a lot of fun with it. And like you said, you have to love what you write. And so my first reader is obviously me. I'm the first person reading the things that I write. And so I figure if I'm entertaining myself, maybe I'm on the right path. I think if you wake up in the morning and you cannot stand what you're writing, if you're bored, maybe that's a bad sign. So, with this series, I had a fun setup, and it starts with defying the Earl, and so I kind of had this grumpy sunshine, two people butting heads situation, which is always makes for tons of great banter and conflict, and that just keeps the pace going and makes it a lot of fun. So the final Wild Winchesters book will come out next year. That's A Waltz on the Wild Side. And also my young adult horror debut will be out next year. That's called The Protege. And so going way back to my roots, right? Ooh, horror now. And it's a lot of fun. I've got this protagonist who's kind of like um, Dexter or Cruella or John Wick. So you've got this morally gray, she's out for revenge. She will do what she has to do to survive. And it was so much fun to write that kind of character who is not trying necessarily to be a good person. She is just trying to do the best that she can, even if that means she's got to kill a few people to get to the top.